fun of these Get On Board sessions, if this is your first time joining us for these events, they're in partnership with the Assisi Foundation of Memphis, Inc., and they've been a huge supporter and partner in this effort. The idea is to put on a quarterly series that gives you information. We have different speakers, different topics to help you with your board service. So this is designed to help nonprofit leaders, corporate leaders who are serving on boards, anyone who wants to serve on boards and just become more knowledgeable and more successful with their service. So the whole idea is, how do we equip and engage board members to be more successful in lifting our nonprofits? And so that's the idea of this series. And that's why John Carroll is perfect for this series. We'll introduce him officially, but we are definitely excited to have you join us for this Get On Board session. And once again, this is in partnership with the Assisi Foundation of Memphis. So we appreciate their partnership. Let's go ahead now that we've got people coming in and the numbers are still climbing. So welcome, welcome, welcome. We're asking everyone just to put in the chat box where you're logging in from so we can say welcome. That's the fun of these virtual. There we go. From the Assisi Foundation right there. Ernie's joining us and Chastity. Awesome. Welcome. Thank you for your support. We appreciate it. The Assisi Foundation. New Memphis coming on as well. So what you're going to see, John is going to present. We'll do some Q&A. So as we're going through, you can put your Q&A, your questions in the Q&A feature, or I'll monitor the chat. And then John and I are going to do some Q&A toward the end, and that'll be your chance to ask a lot of questions. So definitely use the chat, use the Q&A. The Q&A is the easiest one, but we'll monitor both. Germantown Education Foundation. Look at that. We're all over the charts. This is awesome. All right. So let's go ahead and get this party started. Let's introduce John Carroll. John Carroll is the founder and executive director of City Leadership, which is focused on maximizing the leadership capital and potential of Memphis. Their major programs and initiatives center around recruiting talented individuals to Memphis, developing leaders and organizations in Memphis, and catalyzing collaborative projects for the benefit of the city. I think you know their campaigns very well, but Choose 901, especially that hashtag, is a viral opportunity to promote our city. But Choose 901 is one of their major initiatives and campaigns. Teach 901, Serve 901, and Give 901. So John and his team do amazing, amazing work for our community, for our city. We appreciate them. We have an opportunity to work with them, and just can't say enough nice things about John and his team. So with that, John Carroll, my friend, take it away, buddy.
I'm grateful for this time. For those of you guys who don't know me, I'm not originally from Memphis. I'm from Murfreesboro, Tennessee. When I grew up there, we called it Murfreesboro, and it was a small little town. But born and raised there, and ended up living in Dallas after college, and was in the North Texas area for 4 or 5 years, and moved to Memphis in 2004, and didn't know anything good or bad about Memphis when I moved here. Just wanted to be a part of a movement that was happening here, and thought I'd live here for a year or two, but absolutely fell in love with this city. If you've never been to Memphis, you should come check it out for the short term, and might be convinced to stay for the long term. I always say, Memphis has big city amenities with a hometown feel. I grew up in a little hometown and lived in Dallas that had all the big city stuff. But man, what's great about Memphis is that you've got all these amenities, and but you still feel known, and you still feel like you can know others, and that's a wonderful, wonderful place to live. I grew up and didn't know quite what I was going to do with my life, and was just always trying to figure it out. I wasn't very good at school. I'm dyslexic, and was always feeling like I was off on being able to do the traditional kind of stuff. All my roommates were like pre-med, pre-dental, pre-law, and I was wrestling with that kind of stuff. But one of the things I felt from a very early age was I was really good at making things better. And I didn't understand that. I went to a small liberal arts school and didn't have much of business sense. But eventually I had a mentor tell me when I was 22 that what I was talking about was consulting. And I'd never heard that word before, but I thought I'd spend the next 10 years or so learning how to help others. And eventually in 2010, started City Leadership, which is a nonprofit consulting firm. Before I did that, I was able to latch on to 4 amazing kiddos, 2 bio, 2 adopted, 16, 14, I want to be 14 Monday, and a 12-year-old. And so we live in Midtown Memphis, if you're familiar with that. Um, you know, when I got into nonprofit world, what I wanted to do is want to be a part of helping the good guys do more good. And that's why I thought I could help. And so I've been officially doing consulting in that area for 11 years as a career. Was doing some of that beforehand, and really enjoy it. As we dive into discussing boards today, some of my past, I've been on several different boards. Some of you guys may know, right? The Memphis in May, or Memphis Branding Initiative. Also on the board of Give 901, and was on the board of City Leadership for a while. We made that change. We can talk about that if anybody wants to talk about that in Q&As later about executive directors being on their own board. But I transitioned off that board a while ago, and then I've started a couple of nonprofits, and been an elder in my church, and so I kind of understand this tension. But as I spend day to day consulting executive directors and consulting boards, I've just learned a lot, seen a lot, and going to summarize some of the thoughts I've had here over the years. I've never given this talk before, and so this is just kind of a summary of some of the conversations I'd have. I will say that this conversation we best had over a San Diegan at Brother Juniper's. So if anybody wants to do that, one-on-one, I'd be more than welcome to do that and really contextualize this conversation to who you are, who your organization is. But we'll try to get into the general stuff. And I'm really grateful to be with a couple hundred of you today and share this. Know that these entire notes will be put out in a follow-up email. And so if you just want to focus in and listen, I'm going to switch to some slides here. And so you may not be able to see me. I'm not quite sure how you got your Zoom set up, but I'm going to switch to some slides. You'll hear me talk over some of that. And but all these slides will be sent to you, and you'll have a chance to download them. And so you don't have to worry about trying to screenshot or take some of those notes. You can just add other stuff that I fill in. All right, sound good? Okay, I'm going to screen share and we're going to get after it. And then let you know, we will try to leave some time at the end for Q&A. I'll invite Jeremy back in and he'll host us through some Q&A. So if you thought of something 1 minute in, 30 minutes in, write down your question, save it, or put it in the chat somewhere. I don't know exactly where it is. And we'll try to get to as many of those as possible. If we don't get to them, email them to me, send to whatever. I'll be glad to address it as I can. All right. Okay, well, let's get after it here. Okay, so City Leadership is our org. It is a nonprofit. We exist to recruit, develop, and catalyze leaders for the city of Memphis. A lot of people ask where our client base is. It's right here in Memphis. We grew to about 300 clients at one point and have systematically really structured our org around 24 core clients. That are particularly working around moving children out of poverty using a strategy of education. But we've got about 70 clients on our dartboard, and we serve a lot of different orgs here in the city, including the City of Memphis and Shelby County schools, and larger entities. But we also cross over and help orgs that actually, their best actually is going to help Memphis be its best. So FedEx, AutoZone, and larger organizations such as that. But we're also about just movements of people, and so you'll hear us talk a lot about the advancement of minorities in our community, which obviously are the majority in our community, which actually are our community. And so it's really beautiful. What a wonderful city that's led and created and developed by primarily African Americans, but also all the edges of all the different people groups in our city as well. So we do that. This talks about kind of what I was just saying there. You can read that later. You can check out our website. But what most people know, and they don't know City Leadership, they know Choose 901, right? So City Leadership is meant to be a consulting firm for nonprofits. So if you run a nonprofit, you probably know who we are. But Choose 901 is actually a campaign to promote the city that is obviously a lot broader reach. About 300,000 unique devices in Shelby County get to our social media and website every month. And so we have a very large reach with Choose 901, but Choose 901 is not just a booster campaign for the city. It's very strategic. We actually started it to help nonprofits recruit college graduates for their staff teams. And so that's why it actually exists. And we really answer the question of, hey, for a collegian or for a 20 something, hey, I want to invest my life. Where can I do that? And so Choose 901 answers that. But then it also answers the question, will I enjoy being there? And so we talk a lot about invest in joy and how Memphis is the premier city to do that. And you can obviously check out our social. If you're not subscribed to our email, you should definitely do that 3 times a week. You can go to choose901.com and do the email stuff. A lot of people don't know we also have Choose 901 alumni. And so we've got 1,800 students who graduate from high school, become a Choose 901 alumni. We work with them for 10 years as they go off to college and help recruit them back to the city. So we're not just recruiting non-Memphians to the city, we are trying to retain the talent that's being developed out of our education partners. So there's only a 3% chance that if you are born into poverty in Memphis, that you will be out of poverty by the age of 30. And so we are using education to help them get them college ready or educational ready after high school, but also using relationships, we call it relational recruiting, to bring them back to Memphis. Some of our other programs, Teach 901, we have the largest teaching recruiting program in the country. And so we just had a job fair last week. If you know anybody who wants to teach and make an impact there, check out Teach 901. Serve 901, we recruit college students to come and be a part of Memphis and serve nonprofits that we work with. And so we've got thousands of college students that come here every year when we're not doing a pandemic, and do tens of thousands of community service hours here in Memphis. And Give 901, which is our strategic employee giving campaign. And actually we're about to open that up to the whole city, but it helps people really work strategically with their dollars. You know, we think the process is that people want to give, they just don't know where to give, and they want their giving to be significant. We show how to do that without holding any over or taking any percentage out of that giving. And so you can learn more about that at Give 901. But this is all about serving Memphis, and we're mostly serving Memphis. I know some of you guys who aren't here, but I'm just going to brag on our city a little bit. It's unbelievable. Our study showed 11 years ago that only 34% of Memphians were actually optimistic about the city's future 11 years ago. Recently, that survey last November showed that 74% of Memphians are optimistic about Memphis these days. And there's just been a ton of growth and a lot of reasons for that. And so we're really excited to be a part of our amazing city, which obviously looks like this when there's not a pandemic, and we have this incredible street of Bill Street and all the things that happen over there, like the amazing music that comes out of our city, and obviously the amazing food that comes out of our city. And some people don't realize we have incredible recreation. Don't know if you've been out in the Mississippi River, but it's awesome. Wear a life jacket if you're going to be this guy. Obviously, we also have the Civil Rights Museum, and we get to be the steward of communicating what true justice is, since we were unfortunately the location of 2 men who weren't from Memphis, one of the most horrific murders in the history of our country. But we get to be a steward of that. And so really grateful that we get to be the epicenter of communicating justice out. And then really understanding that Memphis is all of us. It's not one of anything, it's all of us together, and that we, the sum of its parts is really what makes Memphis great. And so we're really grateful to live in a city that's awesome. I will say this, as we think about the problems in our city and think about how to do this, one of the reasons why I believe in nonprofits is because we've got to be strategic about our problems. Here's the reality. Big cities have problems. Every major city in the country has problems. The question is do they have people making progress on those problems? And that's where boards come in. That's where nonprofits come in. That's obviously where executive directors and staffs and all that stuff comes in, is people who want to make progress on those problems. And that is the difference between a city that's getting better and a city that's getting healthier, and one that's staying stagnant or one that's regressing. And here's the reality, people. No other city is waiting on us, right? They're not sitting over there going, you know what? Memphis looks a little behind us. Let's wait to get better and let them catch up, and then we'll both get better together. Every other city is trying to solve their own problems, and they're not waiting to hear about whether or not we have big problems or little problems, or if we can solve our problems or not. They're worried about their problems. If you've never lived outside of Memphis, I'll give you a thought here. Most other cities aren't thinking about us. They're thinking about themselves. And so, I always say is that you never hear anything bad about Memphis till you move to Memphis and meet a Memphian. That's getting better every single year. But that's something for us to think about, is that we are the ones controlling the narrative. In fact, 70% of people in the United States have a neutral opinion of what Memphis is. And so we get to control the narrative across the country. And so we get to either say that this is a good city or this is a bad city. And I want you guys to use your voice and talk about the things that are happening here. And you'll use your voice if you're actually using your actions. If you're doing good actions, you'll talk about good. If you're not doing anything, you're not going to either talk about anything at all, or you're going to be more content to complain and criticize instead of creating and cultivating. And that's what we need leaders do in our cities: creating and cultivating to solve the problems. Let's make progress on our problems. Nobody's waiting on us for anything. Let's get after it. Okay. So where do boards fit in? And so I'm grateful. Jeremy and I were talking last fall. He asked me if I'd come and share some of this stuff. And so I'm not sure if this will be, everything that we need to hear, and this will probably just be a slice of the pie of the conversation. But I want to get into and talk about it. Now, when I do talk about it, one of the things I want you to understand is I know that there are people in here who are already on boards and have never worked in a nonprofit. Thank you so much. A lot of this conversation is going to be angled towards you. There's going to be some of you who are looking to serve on boards. Awesome. Aspiring for leadership is exactly where we need thousands of Memphians to be. Looking for a place to get involved and understanding that and knowing more before you do that is really, really powerful, instead of just stepping into it blindly. So thank you for considering that. Let's get you involved. Let's get you plugged in. If you want to be a board member, start volunteering at boards, start figuring them out, and start making relationships and figuring out how you can be a help to the current board, to the current staff right now. And a lot of you are executive directors of nonprofits, or you work at nonprofits right now, and you're trying to figure out, hey, how do I lead towards my board? How do I communicate my needs to them? How do I recruit other board members? And what do I want to be shaping that job description to be? And so you'll be able to utilize some of this stuff to even shape some of that and have conversations with them. And so there should be different angles. If it sounds like I'm talking from another angle than what you're coming from, try to contextualize that in your head and try to understand that, just for the sake of time, I won't be able to go through every single aspect from each individual angle as we dive into the conversation. All right, sound good? Okay, well, if we're gonna get on board, the first thing we gotta know is, what are the 4 C's of being a board member, okay? And as we think about this, is what am I looking for in a board member? What do I want to be as a board member? What do I want to bring to the table? And the first thing is your character. Understand that your character is what really, truly matters, who you are as a person. And so we are looking for people of character. I know that this sounds, like, well, of course we're looking for character. Here's the reality. If we don't have this fundamental on our board team, then we're starting to build, from sour water, right? And we really need to come from a place of pure character. And as we look at these fundamentals of a board, understand one of the greatest speeches I've ever heard of all time is "This is a football." And if you've ever heard this, it's Vince Lombardi speaking to his football team, a professional football team, the Green Bay Packers. And the first day of summer practice, he walks in, the whole team's out there, and he walks into the football, and he looks at his team and he says, "This is a football." Now, I don't know about you. You probably don't have to tell a professional football team that this is a football, right? But what he was doing is he was trying to bring it all the way back to the basics. And he actually took them through a whole week of explaining every single rule of football to a football team. Now, here's what's really crazy. He did this after they had just won the Super Bowl. They had won the Super Bowl earlier that year. And then he comes in the first practice for his team and he says, "This is a football." And he takes them through all these fundamentals. And so as a team, as a board, we have to continue to remind ourselves, as leaders, come back to the fundamentals, think about them, preach them, teach them. Andy Stanley always says his vision leaks. And I think that fundamentals, we get forgetful about fundamentals, and we've got to come back to them. And so number 1, character. Who you are matters. And just know that who you are is who this organization's going to be. Organizations aren't, they aren't their own being. They are the collective expression of who the people are that are running them. And your character will come through in that organization's character. 2, care, all right? So What you've got to understand is that just because you've been offered an opportunity for a seat, or just because an organization needs leadership and you're willing to, a lot of times people get asked to lead organizations because their friends are a part of them, because they're networked, they go to church with somebody, they work with somebody, and they just see somebody like, hey, you look awesome, I need help, come and be a part of that. Here's one of the things you gotta understand. Do you care, right, about that organization's mission? You've got to resonate with that. Okay. You've got to resonate. Do you care with that? You've got to be able to wake up in the morning and think that matters to me. You've got to be passionate about that. One of the things that people understand is that anger, right, is actually a really good thing. Anger is the core root of passion. So if you're passionate about something, understand that you're angry about it. And so, like, you're angry that people are homeless. That means you're passionate about it and you want to get up every day and help more people find their forever home, right? Or you're angry, right, that kids don't have mentors, and that you're angry for that, and you're passionate about trying to be a mentor in someone's life. So do you care about it? Can you wake up and care? Because if you've got character and you care, then you're on your way to being able to be really, really helpful to an organization. You got to make sure you have overlapping values. It doesn't have to be the only thing you care about, but can you wake up caring about this mission? Commitment. So a lot of you guys are overcommitted right now. Some of you right now are thinking, why am I in this seminar? I've got work to do, right? I've got things to do around my house. I've got something going on this weekend. I've got whatever. Wow, I'm overcommitted. All right. All of us that are usually that are very capable of giving, we giving of ourselves, we end up overcommitted. And so I want to make sure that you're thinking through, can you make the commitment? These organizations don't need token names. They don't just need somebody to show up and just kind of be like, yeah, they need your time. Do you have the time to commit? As executive directors, do you understand how much time you're even asking of board members? Are you setting the bar so low and just saying, just show up 3 times a year to board meetings? Or are you really communicating clearly to them, hey, this is how much time I need from you? A lot of boards, will ask board members, right, especially board chairs, hey, I'm asking for 5 hours a week of your time. I'm asking for at least 2 hours a week of your time. But as a board member, how many hours a month are you asking for them in that? And have that clear, making sure that commitment's there. And then as you are committing to that, making sure you're able to give that time. But not just the time, can you give your attention? Can you bring your full self to that time? Do not just show up and then be distracted with Facebook, your own things, whatever, sitting at a board meeting, reading emails, being text, even on Zoom, right? How many of you guys are doing board Zoom meetings right now, right? Don't allow yourself to be distracted. Be fully focused in, be fully present, and being able to give your time and your attention with that time. It's way, way better for you to give 5 attentive hours a month than just 10 disoriented hours every single month. Those 5 focused hours are way better. You know this of every other fundamental in your life, so bring that commitment as well. And then charity. As a board member, you have to be willing to bring your resources to the table. Some of us can bring more resources than others, but I just challenge you. One is that you need to be giving financially. If you're a board member and you're not, just being on the chair is not good enough. I promise you, you need to put a little money into it, and you need to put enough money into it that you wouldn't forget that you're putting money into it, whatever number that is for you. If I was on a board and I was only giving $10 a month, I could forget financially that I was giving $10 a month to an organization. So I've got to move that up. It doesn't have to be that I give my life savings. I don't have to put myself in financial strain, but I need to give enough financially to be able to remember, like, hey, this matters to me, right? That I actually give to this. You need to be committed. The whole board needs to be committed. You need to also be committed with just your general resources, right? Can you utilize your home? Can you utilize your car? Do you have, some of you guys have vacation homes that you could, the team could use for staff retreats, or do you have other resources and access to tools or different sorts of things? How can you utilize and bring resources to the table, even beyond actual money? Everything is an asset. How can you bring your assets to the table? And also your relationships. understand you need to be charitable with your relationships. Some of us are extremely extroverted and have a lot of relationship energy to give. Others feel more introverted and only have a few. But we need to be charitable with our relationships and understand it's our responsibility to bring people to the table, not just give them the option, but actually bring people to have psychological ownership of the organization with us. And so convincing that neighbor, convincing that brother or sister, convincing that parent, convincing that friend from college, making that step out there and asking people to get involved, whether it's in their finances, they're actually volunteering and being a part of it, or being able to bring your networks to the table and get people there that can help get things done. You've got to be charitable with your resources, your money, your assets, and your relationships. Bring all of that stuff to the table, okay? So those are our 4 C's. But a common point of confusion in nonprofit is if I bring those 4 C's and I get on this board and whatever, is that what am I leading? Who's really leading? What's happening here? Am I serving the executive director? Is the executive director telling me what to do? Am I telling the executive director what to do? What's really happening here? And so we got to figure out who works for who. And I think once we can focus in on who works for who, and we understand this as a board culture, then a lot of things will happen naturally and flow from this. And so, is the board the boss? Is the executive director in charge? The answer is neither. In fact, who do you answer to? You answer to the mission. The mission of the board, the mission of the org is in charge. And you have to have a really clear mission. If you're on a board right now and you can't say the mission of your organization, that's your homework for immediately after this. Do you really understand the mission? And then if that mission feels unclear, or if it creates confusion, then that needs to come up as a process of something you need to walk through this board. Like, hey, we need to get this really clear. We've got confusing missions out there all the time. We've got limited missions that seem like they're just really generic and that they don't actually cover what the org does. And we have antiquated missions. We have a lot of organizations that have missions that are written out there that now as the organization has progressed, it seems like what we do every single day is not really the mission. Let me make a point of clarification here. Your strategies aren't necessarily your mission, okay? If your mission is to end homelessness, a homeless shelter is a strategy process of ending homelessness. It's not, your mission is not the shelter. Your mission is to end homelessness. And so you've got to be able to understand. And so then you have the strategy of the shelter, the strategy of the education, the strategy of the workforce empowerment, the strategy of the relationships, the strategy of the mentoring, all these other things that you're doing to come back to that mission. And that mission is what's in charge. That mission is what you answer to as a board. In business all the time, they look at this kind of pyramid, right? A board of directors, a CEO, vice presidents, middle managers, department managers, sales staff, and sales support staff. And this is what you see all the time in organizations that are for profit, right? And they put on top of this, you hear this common saying that customer is king. And this has kind of been the traditional pyramid thought. And then you guys will hear all the time, no, we are a servant leadership model out here. The board of the directors serves the CEO, who serves the vice presidents, who serves the middle managers and department managers and sales support staff, and still customer is king. This is the for-profit really all the time. They flip-flop this kind of stuff and will try to recruit people or say why they're different and put all this kind of stuff in here. So the for-profit orgs, they say that customer is king. What they really mean is customer equals profit and profit is king. And that's what they're working on. Profit is what they serve. Profit is what they're looking at, especially public companies. But for the nonprofit, the mission is king. How do we understand? Now, understanding our mission is in charge of everything. I want to show you this, right? So if we were doing the pyramid, the mission, then the board of the directors, then the executive directors, then the staff team, but then the mission. See, the mission is actually what the board of directors report to, the executive director reports to the board, the staff team reports to the executive director, and then not the mission reporting the staff team, that's actually showing the staff team is actually executing the mission. The mission is where we live and exist inside this bubble of the mission. And so the mission is on each side of us. And even if you flip it here, right, and you put the mission, the servant leadership model and such, Let me show you how we do it at City Leadership. This is actually our current org chart right here. And so I have several editions of our org chart. Usually as executive director, I'm not only have our live org chart, which this is what our org chart is right this minute, but I have several different editions, like if our budget changes or different, like what I will look for our org chart to be in the future. That's just a executive director pro tip here. But what you'll see here is we got the mission over here on the right, and that is the boss of the board of directors, and that's the boss of me, the CEO. And then you can see how our team develops out. But then you can see how all of our work, and I know that on every single of those boards, those things flow into, but it gets a little messy, flows back to the mission, right? The mission is the bookends of what we do. The mission is in charge, and the mission is what we create, and that whole thing cycles around. And if those two things on each end of the organization don't look and resemble the same, then something's happening wrong here in the middle. And that's how we organize city leadership, and that's how we look at the mission is in charge, right? So if the mission is in charge, where do we focus our time? And one of the things, if we've got the mission clued in here, if we understand our mission, if our mission is clear, then what do we as an organization, as a board, need to be doing? Where do we focus our energy? So the first thing as a board is you've got to make sure is the organization executing the mission? Is what we're doing on a day-to-day basis the actual mission? And that's where you need to start. Whether or not you're a brand new organization or you're 10, 20, 30 years old, ask yourself the question. When we look at the mission, are we executing the mission? How are you measuring that? It can't be just a good story. Listen, stories are sticky, stories are powerful, stories are great, but you've got to have some data. And as a board, you need to be asking yourself, are we executing the mission? How do we know? How do we prove to ourselves that we're executing this mission? Second is strategy, right? Then we continue to say, all right, now that we're executing the mission, what is our strategy? How do we fine tune our strategies? Are there other strategies we need to consider? Is there other things that we can do? Again, we can't hold any strategy as king. It can't be the sacred cow. If there's a better way to do our mission, then we've got to be willing to cut the strategy. One of the things that scared my staff when I said this and scared my board is that they try to understand is that Choose 901, even though it's one of the biggest media outlets in the Mid-South and it's so powerful and a lot of you guys follow it and think it's cool and all that other kind of stuff, it's a strategy. It's a strategy to convince Memphis to be an optimistic place, convince people to move here, convince people to stay here, and to help communicate that Memphis is the premier city in the country to invest and enjoy your life. If it ever doesn't work, I will unplug it and we will do something else because it's not king. I don't care how many people follow it. I don't care how many people use the hashtag. All that kind of stuff. It's great. I love it, right? I mean, believe me, it's fun, but it's not our mission. Our mission fueled creating it. And if it ever doesn't work, or if there's some other way to do it, I will pull the plug on it because it's just a strategy. And as a board, what you have to ask yourself is you have to look and focus. Are we executing our mission? And then going back and fine tuning our strategies, considering other strategies, hearing from the executive director, what are other strategies you could possibly bring to the table to fund and be a part of, and making sure you continue to ask yourself that question. And then later, your mindset, right? All right, we've got our execution down, we've got our strategy down. Are we winning the battle right in here? As a board, do we really understand what we're doing here? Are we focused on, do we have the clarity and we don't put it in autopilot? Nonprofits can't go to autopilot. We have to continually be managed and moving forward. We got to continue to look to improve and get better. We do not go to autopilot. We continue to go to our mindset, making sure, does the board have the correct mindset of understanding the mission and execution strategy? Is the executive director clearly telling us that his team or her team is bringing that sort of stuff? And then the people they serve and the people who support the organization, do they have the correct mindset to understand all this kind of stuff? That's where you focus your energy, execution, strategy, mindset. If you're off on any one of these and you're having trouble in one, step back into the one before and make sure you're clearly understanding that. Understand that confusion is your enemy, clarity is your friend, right? Clarity is where we need to be. And so you need to have a ton of clarity. Don't feel like you've got to get persuasive and stuff. Just get the confusion out of the way. If you ever feel confused about something, that as a board, you should be attacking. I'm confused about how people can get involved in our organization. Attack that. I'm confused about why someone would actually donate to us over somebody else. Attack that. I'm confused about how our money is working. Attack that, right? I'm confused about why we're using this strategy from the 80s when a lot of things have progressed here. Attack that as a board. Get after it. Don't just point out problems though, right? Executive directors, I'm going to get a bunch of amens right here. Executive directors don't need boards just to point out problems. They need help to do that. Most of you guys as board members can't afford to hire all the staff that these missions need. And so you've got to bring your expertise to the table and just understand that when you do that. I was meeting with a board chair the other day about coaching their executive director and working through some different stuff. And what we really found is that the executive director was doing a lot of stuff that the board was just assigning these tasks to that the board actually could do. There's certain board members that could execute some of these things. And I just said, look, you've got two full-time staff, 5 part-time staff, and a couple of volunteers over there. If your board would just get a little more involved instead of just assigning these tasks to the executive director, you're going to get back so much time. What they found was about twice a month, they were assigning about a half-day task to the executive director to do something, right? Sell a van, do this thing, research a new internet system, whatever. So you get this board of 7 people. Have these people take some of this stuff off their plate. And what they realized is that very quickly, 2 days a month could go back into the executive director's schedule. Man, over a year, that's over a month of time that you could give back to your organization. And when you think about whatever you pay this executive director, man, that's how much money you're giving back because you're able to get that much staff. And then you're having the executive director do that much work into the system. And so be thinking about that, what you can get and be a part of that. That's a little bonus. Wasn't playing part of the talk. We'll move on. All right. So the board answers to the mission, right? We've established that the board answers to the mission, and they need to be thinking through, this stuff here, right? Execution, strategy, mindset. But here's the thing: the board also holds accountable the executive director. Those are those 2 things, right? The mission is what the board reports to, and then the board hires an executive director to get up every day and make it their career to take the resources that the board has given them and to accomplish as much of that mission as possible, right? So the executive director is your single employee. One of the things I want to challenge you board members is stop reaching past an executive director and stop telling other people on that staff what to do. Stop trying to give them assignments. Not that you can't have relationships with them, not that you can't brainstorm with them, but you're not the boss of every single employee. Just don't be working around your executive director to try to figure out if you want to give somebody a raise or try to hire somebody or try whatever. You need to work through your executive director. They're your single employee, and allow everyone else there to report to the executive director. You need to give them the leadership that they desire here. We're going to walk through a couple of things here. The 4 E's of your executive director. We've gone through the 4 C's of a board member. Here's the 4 E's, how you treat your executive director. 1 is you've got to empower. You've got to empower your executive director. Here's one of the things I always say: trust equals efficiency. If you feel worried, if I just said empower your executive director and something inside of you is like, I don't know if I could give them any more, whatever, then you've got a trust problem. And here's the deal: if you don't trust your executive director, you need to address that as a board. You need to ask other board members, do they trust it? Different kind of stuff. You can't settle on who your executive director is. And so you've got to be able to have somebody there that you can empower and that you can trust, that you can be there, because trust equals efficiency. And here's the deal: when we're doing good, time matters. There are people all over this city and all over this country who need the work of our nonprofits, or our nonprofits don't need to exist. And for them, right, someone who's homeless right now, some family who doesn't have the job that they need, some kid who doesn't have a mentor, some kid who doesn't have the tutoring they need, some kids who doesn't have the relationships, all these sorts of things, they don't have the teacher they need. Time matters, right? any one of you guys listening right now, if you were in some of the crises that our neighbors in our city are in, you would think, I'd rather have that problem solved today than a year from now. And trust is this core element that's going to make your work more efficient. And you've got to build trust with your executive director. If you don't trust your executive director, it doesn't mean you need to fire them and get another one. It just means you need to build trust. And I always say is the big trust builder is time and intensity, right? So imagine time as one axis and intensity on another, and you need to spend time together, and you need to solve problems together, and you need to have conversations together. And so, if you've spent a ton of time and you've tried to solve and spent a lot of intensity, so intensity would be, major problem solving, different kind of stuff, conversations, that kind of stuff. If you've had those two factors working together and you still don't trust, then maybe it's time to think through, is this the right person? Do we have the right person in place? Or ask yourself, should I be on this board? Because if everybody else trusts the executive director, then maybe it's time for you to move to someplace else. But if not, then you should be thinking through, do I trust this person, and how do I build trust with this person? But I need to empower that person. I need to empower them to run their staff. I need to empower them to run their budget. I don't need to reach it beyond and tell them what to do. If I've given them a budget, if I gave them $1 million to manage for that org, then I need to trust that they can spend it. They don't need my permission to spend all those kind of dollars. If you are managing every single expense or having to sign off every time they write a check that has 3 zeros in it, then you've got a trust problem, and that is super inefficient. Why are you as a board managing an executive director and having to co-sign $1,000 check when you are working on a major problem, right? You've got to build into them the ability to trust in, and that's part of equipping them. As a board, not every executive director has things that they're not good at, right? You're talking to me going, well, they're not really good at managing money, but they're great at doing the mission, or they're not really good at managing people, different kind of stuff. Of course, as a board, you are well rounding out all those spots that they don't have here, but you can equip them into that space to get them to the place where they're efficient enough to get your attention working on the big problems, to get your attention on things that only matter, instead of, we don't need executive directors. We don't need board members to come in and double check our stuff, right? We need executive directors who are going to empower us, and where we need stuff, we need to be equipped. And so you guys have got to equip us in this space. One of the things I say all the time, you can find on our website, I think it's the very first thing on City Leadership website, is everything rises and falls on leadership. And if you don't have a great leader into the spot, right, then you need to think about the leader you have in this organization. Or as a board, you need to ask yourself, are we really leading in a way that allows this thing to thrive? And so you need to empower your executive director, and you need to equip your executive director. You need to equip them with resources, different kind of stuff. You can't be just saying like, you expect all these things that they're not capable of doing, but you can surround them. Equipping them can be, hey, I will serve you in this capacity, and I'll help you with your finances, or I'll do this other kind of stuff. But you're not trying to hold it over their head, and you're not trying to be this major checks bounce. And again, I'm not saying that you should let your executive director go out and sign a $5 million loan on a $1 million budget to go do whatever, right? Like that's a different kind of deal. But they shouldn't have to call you to decide if they want to switch from AT&T internet to Comcast internet. They need to be able to move forward. In fact, most executives don't even need to be doing that. They need to be assigning that to somebody else in their staff. And so you need to really equip and unleash them to work on the biggest problems that they've got, and not just have them doing menial tasks. And definitely don't need to have your executive directors doing menial tasks and then you double checking those tasks. Release them to do the work that you have and be a part of that. Ooh, I'm passionate about that. Okay, encourage. You need to be encouraging your executive director. It's so lonely. Can I get an amen, executive directors? It's lonely, right? You end up as executive director, you feel alone and you feel lonely in the city, and you wake up every day working on a major problem that you feel like if you're not successful at, people in the city, your neighbors, your friends, right? They don't have enough. And so you're in this work. Every single one of these executive directors, nonprofits, could be in the for-profit world and probably making more money and being relaxed and retiring earlier and all that kind of stuff. And honestly, a lot of them can do your jobs that you do as board members. And a lot of the board members, you can't wake up and be as passionate about the work that they're doing every single day. You don't have that skill set. You don't have that passion. What you do really matters, right? What you bring to the table super, super matters. But a lot of them are equipped and ready. They could go be in the business world right now and maybe even be your boss in the business world, right? but they get up every day passionate about this stuff, and it is so lonely. Here's the one thing, crazy, crazy insider thought secret of executive directors. We end up working with a lot of our friends, and we end up being their boss, and we end up like setting their salaries. And it is so, I mean, it's lonely and it feels so scary. And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to help you. And all these kind of friends that are out there. And then you wake up and you go to bed and you feel like, golly, did that really make a difference? That really matter? A lot of times we're working on stuff that we won't really know for 30 years from now, did that strategy actually work for that neighborhood, for that people group, for that stuff? And so like, it's scary to be a part of this every day. And we need encouragement. We need you guys sending those text messages, taking us out to breakfast, telling us good things about, writing letters, remembering our work anniversaries, being cognizant of what they need financially, making sure you're paying them well, and being in that space. Let me talk about paying real quick. Board, do not have these nonprofit executive directors and their staffs working in a place where they can't enjoy this city. When I say Memphis is the premier city to invest and enjoy your life, these nonprofit employees and workers and executive directors are investing their life into it, and they should get to enjoy it as well. They shouldn't have to worry about on a Friday night, do they have enough money in their wallet to be able to take their family out to Huey's and to go out and see a movie, right? Or to go to a concert in town. They should be able to pay this kind of stuff. And so if you're not paying them well enough where they can enjoy themselves in this city and be able to enjoy the city that they invest their lives into, you need to pay them more. You need to pay them more now. And you need to address that. And if you don't have enough money in the budget, you need to go raise it, and you need to get in place. How disheartening it is every day as an executive director in this city to have board members who, roll up in new cars and have fancy houses and do all this kind of stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that, but for them not to be able to just go enjoy the city, go buy Beale Street Music Festival tickets, or be able to afford to take their kids, bowling in the Pyramid and that kind of stuff, because money's so tight. Allow them to enjoy the city and challenge them as executive directors to pay so well in their nonprofits and pay their staff well enough where they can enjoy the city as well. They're investing their life. They should be able to enjoy it. That's all I'm going to say about that for right now. All right, entourage. I know that you weren't expecting that. You weren't expecting that E. Not a single person was expecting that E. But empower, equip, encourage, and entourage. And that's what you got to be for your board member. You've got to be the people that have got their back. Anywhere they go, you're willing to go. Any breakfast they walk into, you're willing to come sit with them at. Any meeting that they're going for, you're willing to be with them. You're the people, you've got their back. You're not just overseeing them and telling them what to do and like a workhorse. You're their entourage. You make much of them. You're proud of them. You're telling other people, and anywhere they're willing to go, whether it's physically or socially or whatever, you've got their back, right? Part of being their entourage is being willing to go in that meeting and be a part of it and back them up and be in that. Part of being their entourage, just follow them on social media. Follow them on social media and comment on things they do, like things they do, even if it's not necessarily around work. They comment on their family, like, oh, that's so cool. Share it, share stuff they're doing, put it on your social media, be a part of that, be the entourage for them, surround them, be a part of what they're doing. Okay. All right. Final thought. Here it is. And then we'll hit the Q&A. Here's my final thought. Nonprofits cannot be satisfied with good enough. And that is the core thing that I want to challenge every single one of you board members and executive directors as well. We can't be satisfied with good enough. We can't say, well, that's good enough for a nonprofit, or that's good enough with what we're doing. That's good enough. Listen, some of the things we do may be good enough, but we can't be satisfied with that. We've always got to be improving. We can't set a level where we allow good enough to be our standard. Excellence has to be associated with nonprofit work. That is not just reserved for technology companies or for innovation or, for Smith and Nephew with designing a new knee or something like that, right? Like nonprofits have to be excellent and boards have to put that as the marker, right? The mission is the boss and we're going to do it with excellence. We won't be satisfied with good enough. Listen, some of our years, last year, 2020 was crazy. Surviving 2020 may have been good enough for a lot of these nonprofits, but we're not satisfied with it. We're going to keep getting after it. We're going to keep making it better. I'm not saying that you work so hard where you don't go to sleep at night. Okay. You still got to rest. You're only human. You've got to rest well. You've got to recharge well. You've only got so many hours to put into the day, but you've got to get up every day and bring excellence to your work. And so I just challenge you guys that nonprofits cannot be satisfied with good enough. And if the board is satisfied with that, if the board is allowing that to be the standard, everything will trickle out from there. And you've got to challenge your executive directors. You've got to challenge your other board members. Hey, how does this work look in the series of excellence? If people are going to associate our work with excellence, what level do we have to get to? What do we call excellence? And then how do you as an organization move that org towards that? Data helps a lot, measuring things a lot, reporting stuff a lot, but honestly, being in tune, caring, having that attention on it every single day will allow it to be a part of it. And if it's what you care about and you're being attentive to it and you've got that character, man, you can really be a part of that. You'll want to bring your charity to it. So there's a billion other things I could talk about, but that is what I've got for today. And we'll take some Q&A as long as you guys want to do. I've got no hard stop, but I know some of y'all may have to jump off.
All right, so let's go ahead and you've gotten a lot of amens in there, John, that's for sure. And yeah, the entourage and I think there's so many things to touch on, especially when you go back and you talk about just the investment in, and I think that's a big one that we've always covered on our end, is just the reality of, if you're serving on a board, you financially have to give, because in many cases, if they're applying for a grant, the first thing they ask is there 100% board participation? And so there's little things like that as a board that you just have to know. I like how you mentioned being honest up front and knowing how many hours or how much time needs to be committed, because I've served on boards where they said, oh, it's only a couple of hours a month. And then next thing you know, it's more like 40 to 50 hours. And I've had some that say, oh, it's this, but then it's this. So being very transparent about the financial giving and expectations, the time commitment, are there committees? What are just some tactical things on either side, either questions to ask or as a board presenting an opportunity to a board or a nonprofit presenting it to a potential board member that they need to be cognizant of and thinking about so that there is transparency?
So whether you're an executive director or a hopeful executive director trying to start an org and you're looking for executive director, you're looking for board members, or if you're a board member and you know that you're looking for other board members and looking to fill the gaps and that kind of stuff, it's the same thing that hits us in the for-profit side of asking people for sales. It's the exact same thing of asking anybody to make any sort of commitment. It's that we act small because we're so afraid to get a no. Right? So we're so afraid to get a no that we ask for just the littlest thing that we're pretty sure they'll say yes to. And so we play it small, we play it little. Hey, you really want someone's help. And so you're like, hey, could you it's not that much. I won't ask that much of you. I just need you. I just need a little bit. I just need whatever. And we set it up for failure because we get somebody to commit to a tiny commitment when what we really need is not their whole life, but we need this, not this, right? And so we let that, we start with our own fear of hearing no, when really we need to have a real clarity about what we're asking for, Jeremy. And then we need to ask for what we need. We need to know our need as an organization, ask for what we need. And if we get a no, we take that as a blessing that we didn't end up with somebody, even if they were the name whatever, or they're multimillionaire, or they've helped some other whatever. If we get a no, we know that, hey, we weren't going to get what we needed from that person anyways. And so let's ask people for what we need. Let's know what we need. Let's ask people for what we need and not be afraid to get no's. I'd rather ask 100 people and get 99 no's to find the right yes who understands what they're committing to and being a part of it. Can't be desperate. Can't just hope that somebody can fulfill some magical wish list that they can't, whatever. But we can't ask for something so small just so they'll say yes, just so we don't feel bad because we got rejected, right? And so that's the big key right out of the gates.
Yeah. All right, so let's go to the Q&A. So here's one. Thoughts on forcing people to roll off the board. So you really need to get people off the board. You have several who are disengaged. How do you do that?
Man, obviously, one, you got to understand your charter. As a nonprofit, you should have a charter that has rules around this kind of stuff. And so, before you start a nonprofit, you really need to think through, hey, how would I get somebody off this board if they end up being a dud? But as an organization, you've already got duds on there, or man, you're an executive director jumping into a nonprofit that's already had an executive director or two or three or four. And so you're trying to understand, like, wait a second, all right, who are these people I'm working with? What I'm looking at there? And as other board members, golly, these people seem not to be involved. How do we get there? And so one, there's rules around that. There's actually rules in your bylaws about how you should get people off. So one is understand that. Two, man, be human with people, right? So like if you're whether you're the executive director or a board chair and you're looking at getting people off a board, go sit with someone as a board, have the guts and the courage, right? As a board member to go and sit with someone and say, hey, thank you for how you serve. It seems like this isn't something you're involved in. It's totally okay. I'm asking for you to step down from the board and to consider that. And if that's usually, there's no turning back, right, from that conversation. So having the courage to be able to have that, or if they're waffling, go and have that conversation. Hey, it seems like you've got a lot on your plate. We really need a core group that's committed. And I know that you want to give when you can, but right now we need a board where everyone's either all in or they're out. And because we need a culture of a board that's everyone's all in, because I can't have 3 of our 8 board members be sort of in, because what it does is it messes up the culture and it messes up kind of our feelings around it. So I need so be willing to have that conversation no matter what the charter says, and then understanding, being able to ask people to step out of that. So you either ask them be all in or be all out, and just know that that's where you need as a culture. But as the board chair and as the executive director, you all need to have that trust of that kind of level of conversation and be asking yourselves that kind of stuff. A lot of people have things, 3-year commitments, you can renew 1 time or 2 times or infinite number of times. You can keep kind of stuff like that being there. One of the things I challenge people is don't be afraid to have board time limits, even if you don't want them to ever roll off, right? So I tell board members all the time, hey, you're committing to 3 years, you're committing to 5 years. And honestly, you'll get more out of them if they have a time limit, and you may get 15 years out of them. But if they know that they're going to get a chance to re-up, I tell people, hey, you're committing to 5 years. In 4 years from now, the anniversary, I'm going to ask you to either be prepared to roll off and get your leadership to whatever, or I'm going to ask you to re-up for another 5 years. But that conversation's not coming forward for the next 5 years. I got you. You're in with me. We're focused. You're not missing a board meeting. This is a priority for you. And a lot of people that you want, if you give them a time limit like that, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, you'll get more out of them than giving them an indefinite thing. They feel like they're always a part of it because they feel like, well, I'll just be involved later. It's not like I'm ever going to roll off this thing. I'm just busy for this season, and they can step in and out. The other thing is asking board members, hey, you want to step out for a year so we can focus in and get this stuff done, and we'll consider bringing you back on. Those kind of conversations as people get busy. Life happens. And so just having human conversations with people and understanding that is a big help.
So let's do this. We are recording this. We will share this recording at the end. We're going to do a thank you for attending email where we'll put John's slides in there. We'll put the video link so you can watch this. So that way you'll have everything you need in this thank you for attending email that will go out later this afternoon. So for those who need to go ahead and drop off, it is 10 o'clock. Greatly appreciate you tuning in. Thank you to John Carroll. And we'll definitely be in touch as we do this as a quarterly series. But thank you for your time and have a great weekend ahead. For those who want to continue on, we're going to continue on. So let's go ahead and keep this going. And I will say, we've had to have those difficult conversations before on different boards that I've served on. And you know it in your gut when they're not going all in and when there's something a little off. And every single time you have that conversation, the person on the other side says, "Oh, thank you so much." Like it
right.
always ends up
relief.
being a very positive.
Relief is one of the greatest feelings in the world, right? And so like they're looking for the relief. They're overcommitted. They feel guilty about it. They got into it because whatever. So so giving them a chance to step down is totally fine. And as a board, you're like, well, I got 9 board members. I need them all to be involved. No, you really have like 2 or 3 because that's who's really engaged. So focus in on who you got, reload, rebuild. You only need 3 to be legal in the state of Tennessee. So do that, get to your core three, make sure you can manage it down, and then figure it out from there. And don't overbuild your board. Don't have 18, 40 people or whatever. And the other thing I'd say is you can have a junior board, right? So you can have a lot of times, I know Make-A-Wish Foundation does this, right? They have a board that runs the organization, but then they basically have another board that advises that board that doesn't really have voting power, I don't think. They'd have to speak into that. But they recruit people from around the city. They give them that title. They do have a lot of psychological ownership. They're a part of doing different kind of stuff. But that's a great place to recruit board members, see how engaged they are. You can make that team, 8, 9, 10 people, give them to commit for 3 years. Having 9 people in a junior board, 3 people committed for 3 years as a rotating kind of thing. And they're basically interviewing to be a board member, even if they come back to be a board member 20 years from now, but they've had that season and they get that psychological ownership. It's a great way to get high-powered volunteers and to recruit and build relationships. So you're getting somebody on you've already seen act in that kind of junior board scenario.
That's a perfect transition to this one from Rick Carr. How would you differentiate the approach between board member and advisory member? So, and would you encourage a nonprofit to utilize both?
Yes, different seasons of stuff. Obviously, like Make-A-Wish, the advisory board is really great. They can handle events. They can have their own events. They're recruiting a younger group of donors. They're recruiting a younger group of volunteers. It's incredibly impactful, and it's a great way to get more people engaged. But as a board member, you have got the executive responsibility of voting, approving budgets, different sorts of things, hiring the executive director, setting the executive director's salary, which probably should be the only salary you're setting, just as a reminder to boards, allowing the executive director to set all the other salaries. That advisory board is able to take on different kinds of stuff. You can have an advisory board just around events, an advisory board just around volunteers, an advisory board just around marketing. You can create these kind of things, and usually a board member can sit on that board, be in relationship with that, and so and they can speak into that kind of stuff. People want to do real stuff. So if it's not real, they'll know it. Millennials have the greatest BS meters in the entire history of the world. They'll know if it's not real. Give them something real to do. They want to do something that really matters. And if you don't give them something real to do, they'll find it someplace else. And so if you don't have people engaged in that kind of stuff, then I'd ask you, what are you offering to them? Right? If you're offering them something real to do, then you'll get real people who really care. And so I do suggest having both. Make sure it has its own purpose and meaning for that. It doesn't need to be as cumbersome as the actual board. Give it a target of something that wants to be a part of. And so those people don't ever have to be promised board membership. Say to them, hey, we're having an advisory, people who care about kids who want to be a part of Make-A-Wish. We need an advisory board about marketing this stuff. Would you be a part of that? Don't tell them that you're interviewing them for being a board member. You just watch that, look at that group. And 10 years from now, yeah, that person's serving that for 5 years and they're amazing. It's a great place to build networks and relationships and get people that really care about your mission. And so and it's really, really cool stuff. So
I'll add this in, and this is
yeah.
something I've been doing a lot lately with nonprofits who ask me to be a board member. And I tell them, it's like, look, I'm overcommitted. I've got my ones that I'm committed to, but if you'll create kind of like an ad hoc board member where I can step in as needed on certain things, you can use me as a resource, but not necessarily like an official board member. But it's like, I'll be more than happy to step in where you can get me for some time for almost like just sitting down and problem solving. Or if you need a certain thing, I'll be more than happy to do. So you can consider me part of your team, but as an ad hoc basis. And I think we're starting to see more of that as well, where it's like you kind of got your go-to team based on certain things that you need that aren't necessarily structurally part of the organization like a board, but they're there if you need them. And I think I'm seeing a lot more of those, especially with just time commitments, which is an interesting trend as well.
Well, and to your point, what I've found with that, and Jeremy, you may find the same thing with cityCURRENT or different kind of stuff, is that sometimes when I'm trying to see if somebody be a board member, trying to figure out that relationship, trying to think through it, or looking for somebody who might be in an ad hoc kind of role. What usually happens is as the executive director, that relationship is as valuable as I make it. Those ad hoc people are meant to be in reactive spots. If I reach out to, I've got half a dozen men and women around the city who they don't call themselves ad hoc board members, but man, they care about the mission. I call them, I sit down, I bounce problems up. They don't sit on our board officially, but man, if you asked them about it, they would talk about city leadership. You'd think they were a board member, right? But they only have to act reactionary. I initiate with them and they react to stuff. A board has to be proactive and reactive. And that's a big difference between those kind of roles. And so, Jeremy, those ad hoc positions you're in, shoot me an email, ask me a question. If I've got time and I can have expertise, if I can, whatever, I'll jump in and help, right? I'll be glad to, whatever. As an actual board member, if you're an actual board member, the difference of what you're saying is that I'm committed to this and I've got to be there whether I like it or not, right? In the sense of being busy or it's a Grizz game or, whatever, right? I'm tired. I've still got to bring my commitment to this. And so, and I've got to be proactive and reactive into that relationship. And so even as a board member, you can have ad hoc relationships, right? You can have other people that you say, hey, we don't need another board member, but I just need your help. And if I call you, you can be a part of this, because all the boards usually don't have everything they need on a staff there as well. And so it's the difference between being reactive only or proactive and reactive. And so that's a big difference there. And you can establish that relationship. I've got several people that, hey, look, I'm not asking you to have to think about this when you wake up, but if I email you, I'm asking if you'd consider giving some of your time. And that kind of distinguishing relationship is really, really good. And it's honoring to people. And I treat them and say, I write them letters. I think when I think about, stuff with my board and I'm encouraging and leading up and getting them gifts and that kind of stuff, I think about those people as well. And I make sure that I'm investing and making deposits because I'm going to be wanting to make a withdrawal relationship wise out of that.
Yeah, I'm glad you clarified that. And I agree. I just think it's important to understand just the dynamics of what we're up against, but also too, the creativity and the flexibility that you actually have as a nonprofit board, as a board member, to be able to problem solve through this. All right. So excellent presentation. And this is, do you have suggestions for how to best structure an agenda for the executive director's report at the board meeting? So that way the discussions follow the mission of the organization as opposed to going through completed tasks, to-do lists. So what's a recommendation on the agenda, the report?
Yeah, golly, man, there's just so many options here. And a lot of that has to do with the personality of the executive director and the personality of the board and different kind of stuff there. One of the things is I would say is, finding your right rhythm and then, staying as consistent as you can into that. What we found at City Leadership is that, we were having 3 official board meetings a year when we were a smaller organization, when, we had, 7 or 8 staff, 1 or 2 campaigns, under $1 million budget. But, when we got over $2 million in budgets and over 20 staff members, and we had, 4 or 5 campaigns we're managing and all these, different kind of stuff. What I found is that, having one of the biggest problems for our board meeting wasn't really the agenda, but there was just too much to talk about, and 3 board meetings couldn't handle the stuff that we needed to talk about. And so one of the biggest things is for your agenda is having more board meetings. I know that sounds crazy, but we went to every other month, and that has solved a lot of problems, because what we found is that when we had 3, at least one of them was all budget, right? And that, so basically it was just all budget kind of stuff and whatever. And then another one might be a little bit of vision, but it just was hard to get everything done. And by having 6 a year, that really worked for us. When I'm on Memphis and May board, it's every single month. And so, trying to get things, moving through. And so those board meetings were incredibly efficient. It was always the same day at the same time, at the same location, and I could set my whole calendar, and they asked you for, hey, you got to be able to be at these meetings. And I was always, we had, I think 12 of those a year. And so I was always at 11 of them. And actually they become really fun. They're really consistent. I got to see people and friends and work with. And so having those consistent meetings, and they found that rhythm. Hey, every July we talk about this, every June we talk about this. And so working through that kind of stuff and that sort of flow. And, Jim did a good job of managing those meetings in that sort of way. As you think through working through that, what you want to do, as an executive director and as a board chair is working through and debriefing those conversations. Was that productive? Was that most helpful? And I think that if you can, you guys can circle up after a board meeting and be able to debrief it and be able to say, hey, what could we have done better? What did we mention? Were we wasting people's time? Did we bring the best problems to the table? Hey, it seems like we ran out of time. How could we have done that better? If you're debriefing that, making notes on a Google Doc that you two are sharing, and then 2 weeks before, or whatever your good rhythm is, maybe a month before your next board meeting, going back, reviewing that together as a team, having your own message. Hey, here's what we learned from last board meeting. Here's how we're setting the agenda for that one. And then let's get better. If you keep doing that, if you plan and prepare together, and then after you execute it, you debrief and celebrate together. I have a whole thing on event management planning we should probably do at some point, Jeremy. But that was my first book contract that I never wrote. So that's my whole story. 3 book contracts, 3 never written a book. Dyslexic's life. But if you plan and prepare together, and then you actually execute together, and then you debrief and celebrate together, and you get that rhythm where you guys have 3 meetings, and even though board only has 1, it'll make it better, and you'll keep fine tuning it instead of me trying to give you, hey, here's the exact formula for you, because y'all will figure that out as you're being cognizant about it. Usually that's the problem, is that you're not getting on the same page before, you're not debriefing after, and you're not making it better each time. And that'll help you for sure.
Yeah, excellent advice. I'm going to combine 2 questions because I think we can combine them. So it says, for a nonprofit without an ED, do you have thoughts on how to grow the organization or serve the mission effectively, knowing that you're going to try to hire an ET most likely? But here's the other one that kind of ties in. There are some grants that require a full-time staff member. If it's not the ED, what position do you suggest be your first hire? So talk about kind of those dynamics of how do you build it up without an executive director? And, if you're looking to hire, should the executive director actually be the first hire?
Man, that is really complex. Again, everything rises and falls on leadership. And so, if there's not an official ED, the board needs to understand is that you're not just a advisory executive board, but collectively you guys are the executive director. And so what you would do I'm not in this situation a lot. A lot of people who have these nonprofits, they start them as a charitable organization, as a way to give back, as a way to put away their money and do some different kind of stuff. And so they don't really have an executive director. Usually the person who founded that, or the people who found it, there's probably somebody in that group that really is acting like the ED, even if it's not. What you really mean is that someone on the board is in charge, but it's not their full-time job. That's the reality of probably that conversation. And so, and you've got this structure, this entity that exists to be able to facilitate the work and passion that you see needed to be done. And so what I would do is I would construct what would be the executive director's job description. If you had a full-time executive director, what would be their job description? And then as a board, you need to say, how are we divvying up this job description? How are we doing this? And then if you are hiring anybody to execute some of that mission or job description, then you're fractioning that off, and who's on the board managing that person, and who is that person accountable to, so that that person doesn't feel like they've got to listen to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 voices that serve on the board instead of that. That's a tricky problem. And I know that a lot of orgs, right? And I mean, there are hundreds of nonprofits in this city that don't have board members. So you're not alone, even if you feel lonely right now. You're not alone in that. But what I would challenge you to do is understand is like, yeah, we have a $30,000 annual budget. We're never going to hire somebody. It would be silly for us to try to pay someone to be able to do this job. It would take up all of our income and that kind of stuff. And so just treat it though as you have an executive director, and try to divvy up those hours and have clear communication amongst the board, what you're responsible for, and making sure there's lines of accountability. Because what happens is when you divvy up responsibility and certain people aren't doing their role, well, man, you ever watch that old cartoon Voltron, right? Where they always fight the bad guys, individuals, and eventually they all come together and they win the battle when the five of them are together, right? Well, as a board, if you're going to try to Voltron this ED role, and your arms don't show up, you're going to get your butt kicked by the bad guy, right? And so like that is going to happen every single time. And so what you guys have got to think through is that you've got to have some accountability that says, hey, you're not showing up. We don't have our arms for this battle. So you either got to get out of here, or we got to divvy up these roles and understand it. And then just give yourself some grace on expectations. If you don't have a full-time person getting up and doing the work every day, you just need to make sure that your expectations are such they're doing that. And then additionally, I'd get you to ask yourself, do we need to be our own nonprofit? Is there a nonprofit out there that is doing this work that if they had our $30,000 every year or whatever it is, could they actually maximize on this way better than we're doing it? Can we go build a trust relationship? And maybe one or two or all of you guys need to go be on that board, bring your money, bring your time, bring your attention, and help that board. Even if they don't actually do that work, can you help expand that kind of work right now? We're in the process right now, city leadership, acquiring another nonprofit here in the city. Their mission lines up with some of the stuff we're trying to do. I've actually got a meeting this afternoon. But if this thing all works out, we're going to acquire another nonprofit. They'll actually stay as their own thing. They'll be a single member LLC, basically operated by city leadership. It'll be its own thing. People can still donate money to that. It'll have its own brand and whatever, but it'll be managed by me, and it'll be underneath the authority of my board. And that board will serve as an advisory board for that work. And so, but that made a lot more sense than them trying to go out and build their whole infrastructure and that kind of stuff, because what we're doing is so similarly aligned. And so that kind of stuff happens all the time. Be creative, really ask yourself, do we need to exist? And if we exist, how are we going to act as a Voltron here? Because it's going to take all of us to kick this bad guy's butt.
I'm gonna take that clip at some point. I love that you made Voltron a verb. That in and of itself has to be like a great moment. Turning Voltron to a verb. I love it. So let's do this. Let's wrap up. Give us some parting thoughts, words of encouragement, as we're still early on for 2021. What are your words of encouragement?
Well, one is that hey, if you're in a nonprofit right now, or you're whatever, and you're thinking, golly, this pandemic has kicked our butt. Well, hey, it's kicked everybody's butt. So don't feel, lonely in that. The greatest thing about a world pandemic is that we're all experiencing it. And yes, you've got problems you want to talk about and whatever. And not that I'd say, there's no excuses. Everybody's got the same problem, blah, blah, blah. Hey, you've got real problems. You need to figure out how to address it. You've got to pivot and adjust into that kind of stuff. But know that everybody's experiencing it. We're all on the same page. And the reality is that either people are going to pivot and adjust and figure out how to do their mission inside of this, or they're going to be paralyzed and their mission and their work is going to atrophy, and people are going to be worse off in that. And so you got to figure out, how can we do our mission in our current environment? And you've got to be processing in a way of, how are we ready to hit the ground running when everybody's got their shots and the world opens back up in whatever year that is? How are we ready to roll, instead of getting to that point being like, oh yeah, it looks like the world's been back open for a year, let's think about how we do our thing again. You've got to be ready to roll. And so let's get after it. One of the things I'm totally convinced in is that if everyone loves their neighbors, they love themselves, that there's enough people out there to care for everybody, and every single problem can ultimately be solved. You can't convince me otherwise. I just think there's more good guys than there are bad guys. There's more good guys than there is the amount of problems that are out there. And there's people there's problem solvers. There's more problem solvers than there are people living in problems. And so it's just whether or not we're going to get enough people to get after it, right? We've got a lot of people in poverty in our city, and that is obviously a big problem, but that's not the only problem. We've got a lot of people that are in so much wealth that they're not being generous. That's a major problem, right? Poverty is not just the problem. The lack of generosity is just as big a problem as poverty is. And so we need to address that with our wealthiest, right? Is that they need to be more generous. The amount of time that people are not actually engaging and volunteering is a problem. just like the amount of kids who need tutoring is a major problem in our city, the amount of people who need to get off their couch and stop watching so much Netflix is a problem that needs to be addressed. People need to be accountable to one another and be like, hey, what if I didn't watch 30 hours of Netflix this week and I gave 5 hours of that back to helping someone who needs my time, right? I don't know how to do that in a pandemic. Well, figure it out. Spend 5 hours a week just trying to figure it out. Even if it takes you 10 weeks to figure it out, that's a better investment of figuring that out and being a part of solving the problem. That is just as big a problem. And that's just as scary to me as the kid who needs the tutoring, because we've got everything we need in this city to solve any problem in this city. It's just whether or not we're going to get up and take the psychological ownership and bring our heart and care about solving that problem with our neighbors. And so I just want to challenge you guys, I know I'm speaking to the choir here, and all you are donating so much of your life and time and energy to this work, but we've got to be contagious. We've got to be contagious. We've got to challenge others to join us in this work. And let me tell you, optimism is contagious. So live out your optimism, bring out your hope, give people a vision, create a pathway for people to be able to donate, to volunteer, to get involved, and challenge them and ask them what they need to say yes to instead of what you think they'll say yes to. Challenge them what you need, and let's get as many people we keep converting over to be productive into that. They don't need to quit their jobs and work at a nonprofit. They don't need to sell I know the Bible says some of that, but they don't need to sell everything that they own and donate every single penny, but they need to give in a significant way they can feel it, both their time, their money, and their relationships. And we need to challenge them in that, because every city's got poor people. What cities don't have are radically crazy generous people. And if we had radical crazy generous people, we would solve the poverty problem, and that would set out Memphis to be crazy different. I know that we've got #1 city in the country for giving per capita and different kind of stuff, but the truth of the matter is, it's because we've got 4 billionaires in town and they're radically generous, and that brings up the level for everybody else. That's the truth. And the truth is that they set that mark, and that makes it look like everyone's generous. But we need to be more generous with our money, be more generous with our time, and that starts being more generous with our hearts. And so if we're generous with our hearts, everything else will follow. I had a guy tell me one time is that if you get their mind, their heart may come, right? You can lead with the heart, and you lead with the head, and you keep your heart back. But if you get your heart, you get that moving forward, the head has to follow, right? And so let's go after people's hearts, we'll get their heads, and that'll bring their wallets, that'll bring their purses, that'll bring their time. And so let's solve the problem of people who are consuming and criticizing for the benefit of themselves. And let's get as many people creating and cultivating for the benefit of others. And let's invest our lives into helping our neighbors. And let's all enjoy this city together as equals as we fight for justice in this city. Let's be an example and a light to the rest of the world, and be proud of Memphis, and be grateful that we get to live in the greatest city in the world.
Amen. Amen, brother. And you got people in the chat saying, I'll buy your book. So there you go. So we have a chance to Voltron together as organizations and individuals. So there you go. Hey, thank you, everyone, for being a part of Get On Board. Thank you to the Assisi Foundation for your partnership in this, your longtime partnership in this. We greatly appreciate it.